Good morning. My name is John Sexton. I'm with Bedrock Home Inspections. I want to welcome you to Building on Bedrock. It's my first opportunity to do a podcast, and what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be introducing myself and Bedrock Home Inspections and walking through what I do and what you can expect from a home inspection perspective. So, a little bit about Bedrock Home Inspections. I actually, for the last 34 years, was an operations manager for Staples and a veterinary pharmaceutical company. And I started when I was a junior in high school. I worked my way up to vice president of operations for the Western region and really enjoyed that job and leadership and the folks that I interacted with, communication, problem solving, etc. But at the end of that run, when that building was consolidated into Portland, I had the opportunity to move to Portland or stay here in the Pacific Northwest, and that's what I chose. So my question was, what do you want to do? Do you want to go back into operations, which you've been doing since you were a junior in high school, or go on a different path? So I had a big decision to make, and one of the first things I did when I took my severance package is I went back to the East Coast and visited my children and my grandchildren. I went to Baltimore, where my son is. 4 years ago, he started a home inspection business after being a plumber for a number of years and really enjoyed that. I had a chance to go out and do some very interesting inspections with him, including the executive assistant to the owner of the Baltimore Ravens. It was quite a house that we did. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the interaction with the people. I enjoyed the product and what he was trying to do. And so I want to try and emulate that, and I want to try and describe that for you in this podcast series. So I decided after that trip that I was going to go into home inspection, and the first thing I did was to jump into branding myself. Who do I want to be? I hadn't even applied for school yet, and I got home and started drafting out my brand. Now, one thing about my brand that I'll tell you is my son, back on the East Coast, his is a different name. It's I Choose Keystone Home Inspection. So when I was back there, I said to him, "Well, Johnny, you're going to make it easy on me. I'm just going to be Keystone of the West." And the look he gave me was, "No, you're not." And so I came home and told my wife, "Yeah, I don't think he liked that idea." And she said, "You can't do that." So I went ahead and thought, okay, well, if I can't use Keystone, what else has rock in it that I could use? And so first was brownstone, which is typically an East Coast type of home. And then my wife said, how about bedrock? So I said, I like that. And I designed my logo and we ran from there. It wasn't until I was knee deep in that being my logo and my identity that it was very clear to me that the first thing that pops into folks' mind when they hear bedrock is the Flintstones. Not necessarily what I was thinking when I thought of bedrock. I was thinking about the foundation, the solid foundation of rock in geological terms. But that works. Hey, if the first thought that folks have when they hear Bedrock Home Inspections is of the Flintstones and sitting on Saturday mornings watching cartoons, I'm okay with that. So I did. I applied for school, went back at 50 years old. Never thought I'd be doing that. It was very interesting. Again, I had no experience in the construction field, but I knew the level of detail that I put into what I do was going to make me successful, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So, in December of 2018, I created Bedrock Home Inspections LLC, went back to school in January, graduated, if you will, from that class in about 4 weeks later. Did a lot of studying at home, went and took the 4-hour, 300-question test for the state, and passed it in my first try. So my first attempt, if you will, at getting out there and marketing myself was to do, again, what my son did, which was go to open houses with a little goodie bag filled with my literature, my business card, a cold drink of water, some chapstick, and some mints or something of that nature, and just introducing myself to realtors. I know ultimately my client is the buyers of the home, but the realtor community is the one that I need to connect with so I can show them what I can do in a home inspection. So, why home inspections? Again, I talked about I had fun with my son. I love the communication with people, but I recognize that the level of detail that goes into a home inspection is the same level of detail that I put into my buildings, and really specifically when I was in the veterinary pharmaceutical. If we didn't send the right product to the right customer, little Johnny's dog down in Chehalis, who was bit by a rattlesnake yesterday, may not get the right antidote. And so we had to have high quality. And I've always prided myself on that quality. I think I've got a very keen eye for detail, and I know that that's going to come into play. I love the detective work. I love figuring things out. And so I'm really, really, truly enjoying this at this point. Um, so I did my first inspection. A realtor from Keller Williams named Sandra Hart was actually the very first home open house that I walked into and met. And about 4 weeks later, she gave me my first home inspection. I was nervous as all get out. But there was an excitement there too that I had the opportunity to do now instead of walking around my house doing my own home inspection for the fifth time, to get out there and really do it. And I really enjoyed it. I want to thank her for that opportunity. And I've done a number of inspections for her thus far. And she also introduced me to Ignite You, a networking group out in Tacoma that I cannot say enough about how it's built my confidence in getting out there because for 34 years I didn't have to market myself. Folks came to see me in my office, and it's quite different. This is quite different. I'm still learning how to do the Twitter thing, etc. But I'm excited. So let me talk to you a little bit about the state of Washington and home inspections. The state of Washington is one of only 6 states, at the time anyways, a year ago, that have licensing requirements for home inspections. In other states, you simply have to do an online course, meet the regulations and the requirements, and you can go out and perform home inspections. Whereas in the state of Washington, you first have to go to school, which everybody does, but then you have to get tested by the state in order to get a license to perform home inspections. There's continuing education, 24 hours of continuing education every 2 years. But it's one of the things that I didn't necessarily know I would get as excited about as I have, and that's the learning aspect of what I'm doing. And I'll tell you, the first fear that I had was somebody calling up and asking me to do a home inspection on a home in Tacoma, and I'm there for you. I'm going to do it. And I get out there, and it's a 1913 home with a basement boiler that I've never seen. And I look up at this monstrosity of metal and go, I don't know what that is. But what I've found, and I've found some of those situations, is that it's okay because I don't think I'm ever going to know everything about every house. Some said that without construction experience, it's going to be difficult for me to get out there and do this, which others might say, you know what, not having that background, you have a keener eye for that just doesn't look right. So I've got a lot of learning to do. I'm learning on every job that I go out on. And if I find something like that solar powered, what was it called? The solar powered positive seal automatic damper that I saw, and I looked at it and said, well, I know it's a damper. But I turned to the client and I said, by the time you get this report, I will know exactly what that is, and so will you. And that's the great thing about what I've got. I've got every resource to give me all the information I need to give the client the best product they could get. A little story about construction. Again, I have no construction experience, but I had a interaction with a realtor whom made this comment to me. John, I don't know that I'm going to use you anymore. And I said, well, that's too bad. I'm wondering why. He said, well, with your 30 years of construction experience, you're far too detailed and you're scaring my customers. And I said, well, I'm going to take that in two ways. I'm still learning. And there was a paragraph on my report that wasn't worded correctly, and I agreed with him. But I said, if I can learn from this, I will. But you just gave me the best compliment that anybody could have given me. And it's unfortunate that you won't use me again because I'm going to continue to be that detailed because that's what my clients are hiring me to do. And so I was proud of the fact that even he thought I had that experience. And I think that comes from just the confidence of looking for the things that the customers need to know about their biggest investment, more than likely in their lives. So now I'm going to talk about the inspection process a little bit. And what I'm going to do is this first 30 minutes is going to be to introduce Bedrock Home Inspections. And then what we'll do is every week I'm going to post a 15-minute podcast that breaks down the different sections of a home inspection and what you can expect. So if you've got a home inspection coming up and you want to know more about the attic and the crawl space and the things that I look for, then you can go directly to that segment, that 15-minute podcast, and look at that. But in its entirety, I will go through every aspect of a home inspection and how I perform it. So, first thing I do, I typically try to get to an inspection about 45 minutes early. Whether it's vacant or not, if it's vacant, then I have access to the exterior. If it's occupied, then I let the occupants know that I'm there and that I'm going to be spending some time on the exterior until the client and the realtor arrive. At that point, I will have already looked at the home, every picture, every drawing, every aspect of the home, any information that I can get to build a template on my iPad software so that when I walk into that house, I know which way it's facing. I know exactly where the bedrooms are from the drawings, etc. I know what utilities they have, what appliances they have, etc., etc. So it gives me a better opportunity to know that home before I ever walk into it. I do, as all inspectors do, I have a pre-inspection agreement that the client and I enter into before performing the home inspection. It really talks about what I'm there to do on their behalf, and that is to give them a picture as the house stands on that day of what it is that they're buying. I do a driveway presentation, and when I usually go through and tell them that's what a home inspection is, I follow it up with the analogy that I use, and that is I'll ask the client, "What's your favorite car from high school?" And let's say it was a 1976 Celica, which was mine. I say, okay, well, let's say you're driving along and you see that 1976 Celica, and you turn to your wife and say, "I gotta have that car." What is the first thing that Judge Judy or Judge Milan will tell you to do with that car? It's take it to a mechanic. And that mechanic is going to look, he's going to listen, he's going to smell, he's going to go through that car and tell you more so on the major components, your transmission, your tires, your brakes, your clutch, etc. He's going to say, okay, here's what I'm seeing about this vehicle. Well, with a home, it's the same thing, although you can't drive the home to me. So I come to the home and do that, just a visual, non-invasive inspection, I would say to them. And unlike the mechanic who looks at your major components, I am going to look at everything with regards to this car. Not only your plumbing, your electrical, your heating, your cooling, your roof, your major components, but I'm going to look at every switch, every light, every outlet, every window, every shade that I can access. If I can test it and give you the results of how it performed, I'm going to test it. And that's one of the things that the standards of practice, which is what we all follow, talks about testing a representative number of doors, representative number of outlets. And I always tell my client, if I can test it, it's being tested. So from there, I usually tell the client that they're more than welcome to follow me around. And in that approximate 2 hours while I'm performing the home inspection, if they do not wish to follow me around, then I'll certainly call them over to anything major that I want to make them aware of. But at the end of the inspection, as I'm doing the inspection on my iPad software, I'm actually going to sit down with the client and the realtor, and they're going to see a draft of the actual report as it stands. It doesn't have the boxes checked and the verbiage and pictures notated, etc. But they'll walk away with a clear understanding of these are the key things perhaps that we need to talk about with the seller through the negotiation process. So once I go through the driveway presentation, there is a flow that I follow that helps me understand what's going on with the home. I talked about the fact that it starts with the exterior and the grounds. I then, from there, will move into the garage, all the while looking at various components of each section. And again, the 15-minute podcast series, I'll get much more in depth about the grounds and the exterior, for instance, in one 15-minute segment. So you'll know what I look at, why I'm looking at it, and how I might consider it. So that by the end of the podcast series, you'll have walked through virtually, if you will, an inspection with me. And if you're looking for an inspector down the road, then hopefully I could help you out with that as well. So the third section that I go into would be interior of the home. I talked about the garage. There's a number of things from a safety perspective that I must look at in the garage that we'll talk about in that section. The kitchen is obviously a unique one with all the appliances. So I'll walk through and look at all aspects of the kitchen. I'll actually test things such as the microwave, the trash compactor, which I actually saw one yesterday for the first time. Make sure their dishwasher is draining correctly. Make sure their temperatures in their refrigerator is accurate. So from there, I move into the dining room, living room, family room, all the extracurricular rooms, looking at walls and outlets and light switches, etc. I then move into the bathrooms. I always do the bathrooms before the bedroom because of the aspect of plumbing. So that's one thing that I've come to understand is even though I can't see it, everything running through the walls may or may not be attached to plumbing that has water running through it. So from the top floor all the way down to the crawl space, where are those plumbing pipes going and how do they look? Bedrooms, fairly straightforward. The only uniquenesses with bedrooms, if you will, are a lot of the time ceiling fans, whether the bedroom has egress, whether it has the required components to be a bedroom. You'd be surprised. I actually saw a picture of a home where folks renovated their garage and created a bedroom in the back corner, complete with a bathroom. It was a really nice bathroom. Unfortunately, the electrical panel was in the corner where they installed the bathroom, and instead of moving the electrical panel, they simply cut a hole in the shower stall so you could access the electrical panel in the stall. So that probably would be considered not a good use of space as far as living space. Interior, that's a kind of an all-encompassing, if you will, smoke detector, stairs, balconies, any loft type of situations. So go through those, make sure that those are all accurate. Another little story, if you will, the condo I did yesterday had smoke detectors throughout, and so I look at one. It was a little bit yellowish. I knew it was an independent battery operated, so I tested it. It beeped 3 times, let me know it was okay, and I walked upstairs into the bedroom and saw another smoke detector. I hit its button, and all other smoke detectors went off in the house. So I walked down to the panel, which I thought was a LED thermostat, and it was screaming at me to silence the alarm. So I said, I don't know what the code is. So I tried 1, 2, 3, 4, and alarm was silenced. I was happy. About 20 minutes later, I'm down in the crawl space and I hear fire trucks. I think to myself, they would have been here sooner than that if I actually tripped an alarm. But no, as I crawled out of the crawl space and looked out into the courtyard with all the other condominium tenants, there were 8 firefighters and a ladder truck in the parking lot. And I said, you're going to tell me that by getting excited that 1, 2, 3, 4 silenced the alarm, you're also going to tell me that it did not tell you there was no fire. And he looked at me and said, you are correct. So I will not be doing that again. But one of the interesting things about smoke alarms that I need to be wary of. The attic space, very, very important aspect to your house from a ventilation perspective, from an insulation perspective. A lot of times there's equipment up there, there's vents running that should go out to the exterior that aren't. So that's always a fun experience to go up into old attics. Basement and crawl space. Basement, pretty straightforward. Crawl spaces, there again, probably the most interesting part of a home inspection. Not only from the perspective of seeing the home from the foundation, if you will, on the inside, underneath everything, but also the weird things that you might find in a crawl space. And there's certainly been some interesting ones that I've seen thus far, but not as interesting as those that I've seen posted thus far on inspector websites. We then get into your major components, plumbing. So, you think of plumbing as okay, the water goes down the drain, but there's a lot more to it than that, including safety features within your plumbing system. And so I check all of your pipes that are visible. Obviously, I check for any leaks, any corrosion. And that is one area. Water is not your friend from a home, and we'll talk about water throughout those 15-minute segments. I also look at your water heater. I get the serial number off of it. Typically, I can't tell the age of it from the water heater itself, so I go and do some research, typically looking up the serial numbers to find out when it was manufactured, and I'll let you know. Here's what you have. Here's the typical life expectancy you can expect out of that equipment, and here's how I think it's performing. So you'll know what temperature your hot water's at and things of that nature. Your heating system, obviously, another very important component to your system, whether that's the 1918 boiler that I've yet to encounter, or the various heating systems throughout residential heating. That's something that I've got a lot to learn, and I want to know, I think, more than I need to, but I think that's an okay thing too. I want to know more how they work versus how well are they working, because I can take the temperature of what's coming out of your vents, but I want to know more about how it should be performing. Electrical, another one that I think a lot of folks just perhaps overlook, not other inspectors, but just your normal homeowner. In that wiring has come a long ways in a relatively short period of time. There's been a number of homes that I've inspected, whereas the old wiring in walls were the old style, hot and neutral, no ground, and through renovations, folks simply put a grounded outlet into that space where only 2 wires are attached behind that outlet. Well, that's going to register as an open ground because there is no grounding wire, and that's a safety issue. And remarkably, I've seen that in a number of homes that have been flipped, and I can understand it's from a cost perspective, but certainly not the way that that should be wired, because folks expect the equipment they plug in to be grounded if there's a third grounding wire there. I want to go back to the front of the report. So that kind of walked through all of the different sections. Again, we'll go through them in the small podcast series, but I want to talk about the beginning of the report, the second and third page. Second page is kind of an overview. It gives you a snapshot of what was the house and the conditions of the house at that time. Has there been recent rain, which would give me indications, better indications of any leaking in the exterior of the home? Is it dry out? How is the house oriented, so folks understand the conditions of the home at the time that I inspected it. The third page is the most important page, and that's called the summary page. So all of the content within the report itself doesn't necessarily make it to the summary page. The summary page looks at safety hazards. It looks at major component concerns. It looks at deferred cost items. It looks at items not working, and it looks at homeowner repairs and recommendations. So for instance, I may note that there's a small surface crack on the patio in the backyard. I'm not going to put that on the summary page because it's going to continue to be a typical crack on a patio. But if there are things that may or may not affect the negotiations of the sale, for instance, I'm getting a negative, or excuse me, an open ground in an outlet, that is something that, because it's a safety issue, is going to be on that summary page. And that's something that if there are enough of those in a home, that the buyer may want to say, hey, I need to put some money into upgrading the wiring to get the wiring correct. So that third page is one that I always tell folks, I want you to focus on it, but the entire content of the report can only be garnered by reading through all of its content. So as I got a few minutes left, I want to thank the folks at BD Local for giving me the opportunity to check this one off the bucket list, if you will. I'll tell you again, 2 years ago, I never thought I'd be sitting behind a microphone doing a podcast as a home inspector. But again, I'm loving it. If I could say one thing to those folks that are going to be at the tip of my success, and that is the realtors and the clients that I'm getting to know, I do know that I'm going to be great at this. I'm enjoying it. I'm going to continue to learn. And I didn't necessarily know that I would get as much enjoyment out of this. The other piece that I would say I'm missing that will be provided by clients and realtors is that interaction with folks. I really enjoyed leading my folks year in and year out towards success in our buildings and having that daily interaction with folks. So right now, I will tell you that when I'm not working and interacting with my folks, my conversations really center around my dog and cat at home. And so one thing I want you to keep on the lookout for, Mojo has decided he's going to do his own series on Facebook, and that's called Mojo's No-Nos. And so when I see things or he sees things such as that electrical panel in a shower stall, he's going to post that and give you his commentary on why that may not be a good idea. He'll also, I think, expand into a series letting folks know what they should be watching for and doing in the home once they're in that home. Because if there's another thing that I've seen, it's folks buy a home and think, all right, I'm set for 10 years. And 10 years later, there's some issues because there hasn't been things going on in that house that should have, which is why Bedrock Home Inspections also gives out a home maintenance manual. I feel like a commercial now, on what things to watch for and do within your home for those next 10 years so that you're maintaining and protecting your home. Again, I want to thank BD Local. I want to thank Ignite You. I want to thank everybody whom in my first 6 months of this endeavor have warmed up to me and welcomed me and given me that opportunity, and that's all I'm asking. Give me the opportunity one time to show you what I can do, and I believe that Bedrock Home Inspections will be a great vendor for you. Thank you very much.